Welcome to Georgia Classrooms Live. We gathered 5 exceptional Georgia teachers who are working with the English Language Arts Georgia Standards of Excellence and featured them in 4 segmented videos designed as a professional learning resource for building capacity for student writing. The classrooms are authentic Georgia classrooms with Georgia educators and featuring Georgia students in these productions.
Featured in this video is Tori Cinco, 5th grade teacher, and Pam Smith, principal at Avery Elementary School. Watch as Tori takes students through the Readers Writers Workshop with the goal of self-assessment in writing, while the principal observes and gives feedback during the lesson. The objective is for teachers to see how the standards are embedded in the lessons and to seamlessly apply them to their own lessons. We encourage all teachers to watch these videos with peer teachers and coaches for the purpose of seeing the standards as master teachers apply lessons in the classroom. As you watch, look for the practical ideas, the effective instructional practices, and the blended performance-based curriculum.
Pause at an appropriate place and discuss the segments in professional collaborative groups of peer-teacher colleagues, and then set expectations to embed ideas into personalized lessons that you create. We encourage you to apply the lessons and techniques in your own classrooms and come back to your PLCs to discuss outcomes, highs and lows, and adjust the instruction to meet your own classroom purpose.
Remember, it is important that you deliberately design your lessons for your students using your own resources and creativity.
Teaching the Georgia Standards of Excellence is like a finely tuned Swiss watch. Teaching Georgia Standards of Excellence takes teamwork and planning.
As you watch the videos with the goal of implementing in your own classroom, we encourage you to be creative.
Remember to be positive, believe in your students, and know that you are building the future to give our students a strong foundation.
I'm Tori Cinco. I teach 5th grade at Avery Elementary in Canton, Georgia. I have 31 students in my class, and they range in abilities from gifted students to students that have IEPs. I have students that exited ESOL last year, and many students that would qualify for the early intervention program. This is our 7th lesson in our memoir unit. So in this lesson, we have selected our seed idea and begun to think about crafting our memoir. And the students in this lesson are thinking about the structure that they will choose for their memoir and how that structure will help to bring across their meaning. In the mini lesson, students are introduced to how structure can indicate an author's meaning. So we talk about like we're flying over the piece, like we're flying in an airplane looking out the window. And so we look at a couple of different texts and we try to identify what the structure is that the author is using and then how that brings forth the meaning in the text. So I purposely showed the students several different texts with different structures to expose them to the variety of options that they'll have when they begin to craft their own memoir. All right, writers, I'm telling you this because when writers want to study the structure of a text, it helps if we read it as if we're flying above it, like we're looking down from an airplane. So I'm going to show you what I mean. I want you to look at this excerpt of a text of Paul Auster's memoir, Invention of Solitude. And as I'm reading it, I'm not looking at the details that he's using or the word choice. We're looking simply at the structure, so large chunks of text, what type of writing that is, and how it fits together for the larger meaning and a larger structure. So will you join me as I look at it? And you can look at your sheet that you have as well that I tucked in your notebook. And remember, we're looking to see the structure. He remembers that he gave himself a new name, John, because all cowboys were named John, and that each time his mother addressed him by his real name, he would refuse to answer her. He remembers running out of the house and lying in the middle of the road with his eyes shut, waiting for a car to run him over. He remembers that his grandfather gave him a large photograph of Gabby Hayes and that it sat in a place of honor on the top of his bureau. He remembers thinking the world was flat. He remembers learning how to tie his shoes. He remembers that his father's clothes were kept in the closet in his room and that it was the noise of the hangers clicking together in the morning that would wake him up. All right, writers, so will you join me in looking at this memoir and trying to figure out what structure was used here by the author? So one thing I'm noticing right away is that it seems to be kind of like a list. Are you noticing that as well? Okay, so I'm noticing that it's kind of like a list. You know, he gave himself a new name. He would refuse to answer. He remembers running out of the house and lying in the middle of the road. So I'm noticing it looks a bit like a list. Now I want to see if there's anything else I can notice about it. So I'm going to go back to the text again. One thing I see right away is that all of these memories that are listed out are linked together by the refrain of he remembers. Do you see that listed over and over again? So that's kind of hooking everything together. Okay. I'm also noticing that these don't seem to be in any particular sequential order. They seem to be random, the way that he's listing them. Now I want to go back and look, and will you join me in looking to see if all of the memories are given the same amount of length? Does he elaborate on them the same? So I'm just going to look with my finger and see. Like he remembers that he gave himself a new name, John, and that one goes all the way down to here, doesn't it? So that one's pretty long. Running out, that one's not quite as long. The large photograph is just one sentence. So I'm noticing that some of them are elaborated on a little bit more. This one here is pretty long. He has two sentences there where he talks about the closet. So I'm noticing that he elaborates on some of the memories a little bit more than others. They aren't given the same amount of length in the text. Now you'll notice that we didn't just say it's a list and move on. We went back to the text again and again so that we could discover as much as we could about the author's structure and the way that he used it. All right, writers, if you'll turn that text over, I'm going to give you an opportunity to try this as well. Now, this is a memoir that we're familiar with. This is an excerpt from The House on Mango Street that we read in reading. So what I want you to do is you're going to read over it, not looking at the details, but like you're flying over it in the airplane, looking out the window. I want you to look for large chunks of text that you can decide on their structure, what type of writing that is, and how it fits together in the piece. All right, so go ahead and take a look at it, and then I'd like you to turn and talk to your neighbor about what you're noticing about the structure of the piece. So there are many ways we've learned that we can structure a memoir, and you'll have to decide what works best for you. So we can write it in a list-like structure, kind of like beads on a string where we're hooking it together, and those are small moment stories that are linked. We can write it as a hybrid text where it's kind of a mix of that essay or idea-based and the story, or we can write it just simply like an essay where we make a claim and we support it with reasons. Okay? So as you are writing today, you'll need to formulate a plan. You'll need to decide, because you are the author of your writing life, you need to decide where you need to go from here and what works best for you. You'll have to be thinking about what structure you'll use that will be best for your piece, and they may not be all the same. So I want you to go ahead and open up your notebook. And I want you to start thinking about a plan. Okay, some of you might need to look at memoirs, and you might need to study their structures a little bit more. And you might need to even take one out of the folders that I've left on your tables and write on it. Mark the sections and try to see what the author was doing there. Some of you may need, you've decided on your theme, but you need to collect a little bit more of your stories or your small moments or explore that theme a little bit more before you can begin to draft. Okay? Whatever you decide that you need to work on today, let's go ahead and start a plan, and I'll tap you once I notice that you have an idea of what you need to work on today so that you can leave the floor. Having these coaching sessions, it gives me a risk-free environment to receive feedback, and it allows me to improve my teaching and my delivery of the writer's workshop so that it can impact my students.
So how do you think your mini lesson went?
I think it went well. When they were turning and talking, I was noticing some students that are still focusing on the details of the text rather than the structure, so I'll know that I want to pull those students into a group.
I noticed that with Logan and his partner, so you might want to check in with them as well, because they were focused more on the content and less on the structure. They had great conversation about the content, which was nice to see. Well, you had asked for specific feedback. One of the first things you wanted me to look for was how you stated the teaching point right up front, how you let students know what they're going to be learning today. And I feel like you did that effectively. Because you shared with them that really the purpose of today's lesson was for them to be able to look at how writers write and use structure to convey a message. So I feel you definitely did that. A couple of other things that you asked me for. You wanted me to give feedback on the strategy that you were using. And some strategies that we had talked about previously were demonstration, guided practice, inquiry, as well as explanation with example. And I know in your lesson plans you put that you were going to demonstrate how a memoir was organized. And I feel that with the annotation on the anchor chart, you kind of provided that visual for them, and you kind of did demonstrate for them how to look at how the memoir was structured. How do you feel about that? Was that your goal? Was that what you're...
It was. I kind of wish, looking back, that I had done it on the second one as well after they turned and talked, just to mark what they were noticing. Okay. So I would do that in the future.
And I noticed that the structure of the second one was, the second piece you used was definitely different than the first.
It was.
What things would you have pointed out to them?
That was intentional. The great thing about having my principal visit is that she gets to know my students as writers. So she's able to sit down with students and check in, see how they're progressing in the unit, and then comes back to check with them again later. She's able to see their growth, and they love sharing their writing with her.